Hey, all, John Bergman here. I'm on spring break and I've been doing some yard work. But recently I just had a conversation with Michael Wish about what we've been talking about, the Mastery Flip. And I'm in the middle of this three-part series on, the Mastery Flip and the Trebuchet projects and the things that we're learning from that. But the conversation I had with Michael was so powerful and I felt like I wanted to get that to you right away. We talked about grit, we talked about the Trebuchet Project, but we also went to why we do hard things and what message that I want to send to my students. So I hope you enjoy it. Yeah, John Bergman out.
Welcome to Teach Coach Mentor. I've got John Bergman with me today. And John, you caught my attention because we are both in a physics teachers group on Facebook. And you had made a recent post about flipped classrooms that I thought was absolutely fascinating. And I want to get into that. But first, for folks that don't know who you are, could you just give me a little bit of a backstory, a little bit of a background so we can get a level set on who we're chatting with today?
Yeah, I'm an old teacher. This is my 40th year in education. Yeah, 40. And I've had an interesting career. I started teaching in 1986 at an inner city middle school in Denver. And then I taught for,
Okay.
yeah, in 1986. Yeah. So it's 2026. So that's the 40 years. And then I taught high school science for most of my career in Colorado. And then in the middle of the 24 years, I met Aaron Sams. We were teaching a small rural school in Colorado, and we helped develop the flipped classroom model. We were the early pioneers of that. We eventually wrote a book about the subject, the Flip Your Classroom. And then in the meantime, I had been invited by the governor of Colorado to go work on a committee to help rewrite the standards for Colorado. This is before Common Core. And then some teachers, they were like provosts and professors and fancy dancy people. It was like all these people, superintendents, and then me, teacher. And then they said, John, you should leave the classroom because I think you could do more good there. And I met with them for 2 years, and eventually I thought maybe that I should. And so after 24 years, I took a job as director of technology in a school district in the Chicago suburbs. So my family moved across the country from Colorado to there. But in that time frame, our first book that Aaron and I wrote from those Colorado years came out, and it exploded, became an international bestseller, 13 languages, 500,000 copies, and maybe more now. I don't know, lots of copies. And then people started asking for Aaron and I to go out on the road and help them with this flipped classroom model. So we traveled all over the world. I had the privilege of going everywhere you can imagine, from Dubai to Australia to New Zealand to Europe to Brazil to all over the world and all over the United States. And so I spent 7 years doing that, traveling around the world. And, basically I was an entrepreneur, consultant guy, I guess. But then I really felt the pull back to the classroom. So in 2019, I really felt that I needed to be back in the classroom. And so I'm now 7 years back. And it was an interesting time that I restarted teaching. It was 2019, 2020, and the whole world fell apart in 2020. And so I was in the midst of all that too. And this is my 7th year back teaching. I've mostly taught chemistry over my career. That's been my specialty. But in the last few years, I've been much more of a physics teacher. So I've always kind of had a hand in physics, but it's been my minor and chemistry my major. And now physics is the major, so to speak. So right now I'm teaching physics and geology at Houston Christian High School in Houston, Texas. So
very good. Well, there's a lot to chat about. I have a ton of questions. We'll see how much we get to. First, I neglected to bring up that I'm from Colorado. We chatted before the episode started. You mentioned that, and I forgot to let you know.
No worries. Yeah.
Grew up mostly in Colorado Springs. My dad was military. We moved around a ton, but yeah, I grew up in Colorado Springs and went to school there.
Well, we invented the flipped classroom, for lack of a better term, in Woodland Park, Colorado. So that's just up the hill from
not far away.
Colorado Springs. Yeah.
Yeah. So I want to, before we get into the flipped classroom, because I want to chat about that, and I want to chat about the physics teachers community that we met in. I want to ask you about the draw back to the classroom. All right, so you taught for a huge number of years. You're traveling all over the world. You're doing entrepreneurial tech stuff, consulting things. You've got a bestseller book. Why go back to the classroom? What was the draw there?
I guess the story started. I was at a conference in Florida, and it was there before that. But I usually think this is the pivotal moment. I went to dinner with a bunch of teachers at this conference, who are all flipped classroom teachers, and they were just telling their stories. And I'd now been 8 years out of the classroom, and I thought, man, I miss that. And I feel like even as I'm standing up in front of a group of people and trying to teach them how to teach, I don't have that reality left in me anymore because I've been out of the classroom for all these years. And so then I started to feel that, and then my wife and I went on a retreat to Arizona for a couple of weeks, which was a good thing, by the way. February in Chicago is super cold. It was so cold. And we went to Arizona. It was very nice. But while hiking the hills of Sedona, I just spent a lot of time contemplating. We unplugged, and we're people of faith. And I really felt, honestly, I felt God saying, I want you back in the classroom. I really felt a message to reach every student. So the subtitle of our first book was Reach Every Student in Every Class Every Day. In fact, my podcast is called the Reach Every Student Podcast. And I felt the pull that I need to be back, not just reaching students vicariously through other teachers, but with my own kids. So, and it was the right decision for sure. So
yeah, that's great. It's funny, whatever classroom you have, whether it's flipped or not, I think people forget that teaching and learning is a deeply social experience.
yeah,
And I think this is what we were talking about a little bit in the physics group that we were in. AI is really cool, and computers are cool, and labs are cool. And, no matter how you structure the classroom, no matter what the curriculum looks like, what the homework load looks like, at the end of the day, people like to be with other people, and we like to learn with other people. And this is my pet theory. I think it just comes from the fact that we like stories, that we grew up for over tens of thousands of years around a fire, around in a tribe, right? Those weren't just stories for entertainment. In fact, I don't think they were for entertainment value. It's tell the history of your tribe, of your people. It's what you bonded over, and it's also how we learn, right?
yep,
That's why when MOOCs, right? I mean, everybody, maybe I know but maybe some of the listeners, if you're not familiar with it, the massive online courses started to explode in the early thousands, and everybody thought schools are done, colleges are done, schools are done. Everyone's just going to go learn online. And Harvard and tons of Ivy League schools have their entire curriculums for free, and yet people are not hopping on there and taking full advantage of it, which is a travesty in its own right. But the reason is that we want to go and we want to sit in a classroom surrounded by other people, and we want to engage with our teacher, and we want to laugh, and we want to have a good time. And tell me what you think about this, John. I think the primary role, this is controversial, but I think the primary role of the teacher is to inspire the student to want to learn the subject on their own, right? It's not even to explain it well. You should do that, of course, right? It's not to have fun. You should do that, of course, but it's to get the kid or the adult or whoever it is that you're teaching pumped. You ooze so much passion for this thing that they go, I got to be missing something, right? This guy loves this. What about it does he like so much? And then it inspires them to go do it on their own. I don't know what you think about that.
you're 100% right. I mean, a society is built on a story, right? There's a narrative to a history. I'm also a big history buff and read history books all the time. It's kind of a weird hobby. And so if you look at Western civilization, it has a narrative and a story, and so do other civilizations. And our tribes, whatever tribe in the past you were part of or that you're part of now, that tribe needs to have a coherent story. And when it loses its story, then societies fail. And I think that as a teacher, we're telling a narrative and a story about, say, physics. And the kids need to say, I love this. This is what I want to do. And this teacher inspires me to want to aspire to this. We have at our school right now, we have this amazing biology teacher. And I talk to all these kids like, I'm going to major in biology. I'm going to major in biology. I'm going to major in biology. And it's not because biology is awesome, and it is. I'm not saying it's not, but it's because he is so inspiring of a teacher that the kids say, what is it so fascinating about biology? It's what this guy has been doing with his students, and that it's like so many of our kids want to major in biology. It's just so cool. So
yeah, I love it. I do want to get to the flipped classroom because obviously that's what you're known for and the book and everything. So tell me a little bit about maybe what inspired the idea for the flipped classroom, and then I also want to challenge the flipped classroom just because it's fun to debate these things back and forth a little bit, and I want to push you back on a little bit. So
you
first,
go for it. Yeah.
Before we get to the fun part, love to hear just what clicked that said, hey, I think we're doing this whole thing backwards, And how did you get to all the way through that idea to then writing a book and going all around the world and telling folks how to do this?
So our problem was small rural high school, Woodland Park High School, right? You know where that is. If we wanted to compete with the local other high schools, we had a long drive to take the kids to it. So we'd have kids leaving very regularly at noon to go to Canyon City High School, for example, right?
Yeah.
2.5 hour drive. And so all our kids in our chemistry classes, this is Aaron, Sams, and I, would be gone, and we'd be having to tutor them after school to get them caught up because you can't just learn chemistry that fast. And then we discovered some software that could record our lectures. So like period one, we would record our lecture so that our kids could watch it who missed class. And then one day our curriculum director came down, Linda, and she said, I love that you're recording your lectures. My daughter, attending Colorado State University, has a professor who's recording it. She loves it. And then she said this is what else started it all. She said, my daughter loves it because I don't have to go to class anymore.
Right. Yeah.
And that's when Aaron and I looked at each other. That was like later that day or at lunch or next day. It was very shortly after that. We said, wasn't that a weird conversation? And then I'm not sure really, honestly, which of the two of us had the idea. We said, well, wait a second. What if we pre-recorded? What does the kid really need us there for? And so that's when we started the flipped classroom model. And the big idea of the flipped classroom model in a quick nutshell is let's do the hard stuff in class where the student can get the best help from me, the expert teacher. And let's reserve if you will, the homework space where they can get the information transfer. That's the easy stuff where they're going to be introduced to a concept in our chemistry in that particular context. So they would get a chemistry video that we made at home, and then they would come to class and they would do their homework in class and then their lecture at home. That was the idea of the flipped classroom. Eventually now I use text to flip, and it's really evolved quite a bit since those early days. Yeah. But I still do it, right? It works splendidly. So when done right, there's a lot of people who misuse it and are not using best practices, and they struggle with it. It's a common thing. So
let me I want to push on it from two totally different perspectives. So first is there's lots of research that shows tutoring is far more effective than lectures in the classroom, right? For obvious reasons. You get exactly what you're talking about here, where you get that one-on-one support,
right?
You get to identify problems, help them work through the problem. The tutor gets to figure out what the roadblock actually is. Oftentimes help them back up and identify the source and work through it. And so essentially what the flipped classroom does is it says, let's put the focus on almost the tutoring aspect of it. So in that context, though, one of the issues that I have found is accountability. When you're in a classroom with a real human being teaching you something, there's enormous social pressure to pay attention. Whereas if I'm off at home and I'm potentially now just consuming, and consuming is very different than learning, and I'm consuming information, I'm not taking notes, maybe I'm not paying as much attention, and now the student is going to show up to the homework portion where they're supposed to get help, but they've not done the due diligence up front to be prepared to actually receive that successfully. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And that's always the biggest question about flipped classroom. What if they don't do the work or they're not paying as good attention? And so a lot of the best practices center around making sure that they maximize that time. I mean, you have to hold them accountable. So this morning when I was checking my students that they'd watch their videos, they are required to take notes on paper. And then I walk around the room, and then I actually have an individual conversation with each of them. Actually, it tends to be like groups because they've all watched the same video in theory last night. And so I have a big pink marker. And then if they have watched their notes and we have a reasonable conversation, usually the conversation is like this. I say, what's your interesting question from last night? And if they can put an intelligent sentence together, and then we'll have a conversation.
Very quickly.
And then I sign it. I just put my JB on there, and they know that they have that's their entry ticket. And then there's the kids who didn't do it, and we have a little chat about what's going on. And one kid's been gone for a few days and he's behind. I mean, there's things like that, but it's something you got to really sort of level set when you first start the year, so that you make this the norm, and you teach them how to watch the video. You actually don't send the first videos home. You teach them how to watch the videos in class, so you can watch them, take notes. That's what you're really doing. And teaching them how to, so it's all about how you set that. And honestly, as much as people think this is a problem, when a teacher works this through, it's not the big issue that people think it is if you are very intentional about the process of training the kids on how to interact, not just to watch
Yeah.
an instructional video. It's not the same thing as watching a Netflix series. It's very different to watch an educational video for comprehension.
Yeah, fair enough. My second objection, and this is entirely selfish and personal, is I love the lecture. I love going in and having a very well prepared lecture with lots of strategic jokes and cultural references spread throughout, and having a back and forth during the actual instruction portion with the students we're going on, and then of course answering live questions as they arise, which often tends to lead to very interesting conversations and discussions with the students. Do you feel like classrooms miss out on that, or do you feel like you're still able to pick it up when they come in the next day and you're kicking off that initial introduction section?
Yeah, so Mike, I'm a very good lecturer. I mean, I was a public speaker for years and years. I still am, I guess. But where I traveled all over the world, I'm very good in front of a group, and I love live presentations.
Me too.
But I saw the results. My students were 1 standard deviation improvement. And I actually think I'm a better questioner too, because now instead of I'm having these little 3-minute conversations with every kid, which I did this morning, right, with my students.
Yeah.
And I can pick up on things and have conversations with them. And it's because oftentimes in the lecture setting, there's like 5 or 6 kids who kind of help lead the conversation, and close to 25 or something like that. And, bringing everybody involved, that's harder.
Yeah.
That doesn't always happen, I should say. And so I really think this is a better widget than that. It was hard for me to give up the lecture, but I think it's the best thing I did too, the direct lecture. Now, I still do a mini lecture. Another big best practices is at the end of the class, you do like a 5-minute lecture on tonight's video. So I want to say, hey, as you watch this, here's a difficult concept. So a couple nights ago, in my geology class, my kids still don't understand a lot of geography. And so I said, all right, so you're going to hear in tonight's video this reference to the Tropic of Capricorn and the Tropic of Cancer. Let me explain what that is. And so you can understand this, because this is like they haven't had that since 5th grade, if that. And so these are juniors and seniors in high school. And it's like you need it. So I do a mini lecture at the end of class to prep them for the night's video, which also, by the way, answers question 1 you asked, which is how do I get the kids to watch it? I'm previewing their content. And on a pedagogical perspective, what I'm actually doing is I'm diminishing the cognitive load, because I'm prepping them for that video tonight. And here's the hard concept tonight. Then they're going to watch it. And the next day we're going to talk about that topic again. And they'll have 3 points of contact for this information instead of that one, boom lecture day when they walk in the door. And when John Hattie, the famous researcher from Australia, New Zealand, something like that, he said basically what makes flipped classroom works is you get these additional touch points with the content with students, and that's why it's effective.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, very good. I love the way that you started the answer, by the way, so it doesn't matter how much I love the lecture. What matters is the data. And if the students are standard deviation ahead in the flipped classroom, at the end of the day, that is why you're in the classroom as a teacher, right?
Yeah.
Is to help them learn and help them succeed, and standard deviation doesn't lie. So it's not about us and how much we love a good lecture. Too true.
That said, and I think it's super important that we teach kids how to publicly speak. So I don't know if I want to shift the conversation, but when I'm thinking about AI, so I've developed an AI framework, and part of the AI framework is what I'm calling the Mastery Viva. So when a student finishes a lesson, they then have to defend their understanding it with me in a 2 to 3 minute sort of high impact conversation.
Yeah.
And kids today are different than they were 40 years ago when I started, because they spend so much time staring at screens.
Mm-hmm.
I would rather them stare at me and have a conversation with an adult.
Right. And
so one of the key things I think in the age of AI, so that we can protect their cognition, is to teach them how to speak. Not necessarily I'm not saying you need to get up on a stage and speak, but to have an intelligent conversation with an adult, with me, about geology or physics or whatever, history, if you're a history teacher, I think it doesn't, those are so valuable for those kids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I completely agree. One of the things I wanted to ask you about and we'll talk about AI because as my listeners know, I'm big into the AI space in a lot of different ways, but I've also been very careful to caution folks on cognitive offloading and just letting it do everything for you. Uh, One of the things that I really press home very hard is that you still need to read and you still need to write.
Mm-hmm.
Those are really important things. And one of the concerns I have, and this isn't about the flipped classroom specifically, because traditional classrooms have this problem as well, is I think that either teachers or students or just the general public seems to think that the easier something is, the better you'll learn it. And in fact, it's typically the opposite, right?
Yep.
You want the desirable difficulties.
Mm-hmm.
And when you get to watch a YouTube video that explodes the view of the engine and you get to see, I mean, it's a really cool picture, right? You watch a combustion engine and they pull it apart and you get to see every little nook and cranny and how it all connects. And that's really beautiful, except people walk away having no idea how it works.
Yep.
Because you have to go through the mental effort of imagining that part and imagining how it connects to this and then not understanding how it connects to this other thing and working through that. And that's the only way that you actually build your own mental model of that car.
Right.
And then when you see it exploded, you recognize all the different parts, but someone who hasn't gone through that effort doesn't know it. And I think reading and writing are the two primary ways in which we really work through something that's hard or that's difficult.
Yep.
And that's a skill that has been atrophying for a long time. And I am a little bit concerned about AI. One of the big benefits of AI is that you can engage with it. And that's what I would do. That was my first use case, was driving on the way to, I taught college physics, driving on the way to campus, was to argue with ChatGPT for the 45-minute commute I had about the best analogy for this thing, or have it ask me questions that only students or only teachers would ask. And that's a really powerful way to learn and to prepare. But there's still an enormous amount of reading and writing to do, which is what I would do the night before. Typically the night before, I'm writing through new lecture notes or I'm reading through additional materials to make sure that I'm fully prepared. And so how do we make sure that we're not losing those skills too?
So my take on the AI thing is I'm using AI and I think AI has a lot of power in classrooms, but I think the vast majority of students are using it as a crutch and as something that's reducing friction, because I agree with you. The term I didn't coin this, I'm using though, is that students need to go through productive struggle. That's how we learn, right? I've written about this extensively on my website and in my blog, and this guy, Ted Chiang at the New Yorker, he used this statement on, I may get it somewhat wrong, but he said, using ChatGPT to do assignments is like taking a forklift to the weight room.
That's not wrong. Yeah.
And when I see students do that, they are hurting themselves. I mean, I teach honors physics at our school, so some of the best and brightest kids. This was the big moment that I finally said, wait a second, what's wrong with this picture? One of our top kids in our entire school, it's going to be going to an Ivy League school, all that stuff, right? I was watching her do an assignment on physics, and she had a difficult physics problem, and she pulled up ChatGPT too quickly, and then she got the answer. Not that she was cheating, she was trying to understand it, but if she would have sat with that problem for 2 more minutes, she'd have got it. I mean, she's a smart girl, and I knew she would get it. And it's like, wait a second, you're shortchanging that learning process. You're not allowing your brain to grow the synapses, right? To thicken the myelin sheaths. That's the thing that needs to happen inside the brains. And so then I wrote an article after that, and I call AI is going to stupefy our students, make them stupider, unless we rethink this whole process. And so I still think AI has a place in education. I'm not anti-AI, but when AI is used inappropriately, it's only going to hurt kids. And I would argue the vast majority of kids are not using it appropriately right now. They're using it as a shortcut and as a cheat code.
Well, it's because they're human beings, right?
Right.
It's impossible not, if you had a super intelligent being next to you, you would ask it questions constantly. I mean, why
right.
Right. And so,
right.
We're always looking for shortcuts. Yeah.
So, and I'm not trying to blame the kids. We need to rethink what education should look like. And so hence, in my AI framework. I actually say AI engines. So I think there's some space in the like independent space when students are at home where AI can really take over. There's a new tool I've been playing around with. It's almost really ready. It's pretty cool, called Skylow, Skylow.ai. And you have a video, and it's a little creepy. There's a video of me. So I upload or I link a YouTube video that I've made. All right. But then I've also uploaded my avatar. And so my AI avatar basically says what I say in the video, but then you can pause and interrupt me, the AI, and ask questions. So you could build in the interactivity. And I've talked with the founders and stuff of the company recently. I was in San Francisco and met with the founder. And there's talk of like getting more robust data back for teachers. It's really pretty amazing. So this is an AI, so they could learn that in independent space, but then in class, I am now moving towards much more analog. So like today, I've actually started something new today with my geology class. I said, all right, laptops are put away. I just want you to interact. Here's the textbook. And I want you to pull this information because I want them to read, like you were saying. I want you to find this information. So they watched the video, right, in the independent space, not with this cool tool yet. It's not ready yet. Soon, I hope. And then they come to class and they interact with paper. But then also we have these little 2-minute conversations to check for understanding where they have to defend their answer. And it wasn't uncommon for me to go around and ask a question of a kid and they really couldn't answer the questions I'd ask. I said, well, then you need to figure it out. Here's the textbook, go. I'll be back. Bye. So, because this was like the first time where I said, yeah, no extra tools, because what they have been doing is pushing the easy button and using, even just Googling it and Gemini pulling up the answer right there, right? So, and then there's so little friction in their learning, and I need to increase the friction.
That's great. Yeah. One of the things that I would love to see more often is writing prompts and more writing. In the STEM fields, especially. There's already a lot of writing in history and in sciences. And I think one of the most powerful tools for learning how to think critically is the writing prompt.
Yep.
And like no equations allowed, right? Describe relationships, describe observations, write down questions and interrogate what you don't understand and why you don't think you understand it, even if you're not writing out explanations. You're literally just explaining why you're confused. I think that's really powerful.
Another thing, I'm standing up for like that vocal voice. So the last week was the big cumulative project for my physics and honors physics classes. They had to build a trebuchet. So you know what trebuchet is?
Classic high school physics project.
So these kids built these trebuchets that were like 5 foot tall, and their goal was to shoot 30 yards. And some of them did, and some of them didn't. And then, so that 35% was build, design, and performance. And then 30% was a written report explaining the physics of it. And then 35% was today. I was exhausted today because I met with so many kids where they had to defend individually their understanding of the physics. And you get nothing. I gave an equation sheet, so if they didn't know their physics equations. And then they had a whiteboard and they had to kind of explain, and the questions went from rotational kinematics to just some students, all I could get was potential energy equals kinetic energy. And it's something like that, right, Mr. Bergman? Everything in between.
The buzzwords, the buzz equation.
Right. And so it was obvious who had understood it. Now, I expected, honestly, that the papers, which I still haven't read yet, because they were due this morning, the papers were probably well used by ChatGPT or whatever. They had a lot of help with that. Now, some of it they couldn't do because they had a video analysis section, so they'd actually analyze their actual trebuchet, find their actual velocity, what would the trajectory be. So some of that stuff that you can't AI it, really.
Yeah.
And so, but it was such a good experience for the kids. One young lady, she said this, I thought it was so powerful. She said, I had never put all the pieces of physics together until now. Because, I thought them basically as isolated subjects. We teach energy, and then we have kinematics, and we have forces, and they're all kind of like different things. But this shows me how they all go together. So, because we start electricity and magnetism after spring break starts Friday. So after spring break, we're starting E&M.
Challenging one for students, for sure.
And so we are finishing up, mechanics. You're a physics guy. So we're finishing up the mechanics, and this is the cumulative project that kind of ties it all together. And it has been magical, honestly. It's been magical watching them.
Well, that's awesome. Well, I want to keep talking to you forever, John, but I think that's a great place to kind of end it here. Can you just tell folks where they can find you? Please, what's the title of your book, and then what's your website? Where can folks find you? I'll have
Well,
all the show notes too.
I actually have 12 books, but
Maybe just
uh,
important ones
yeah.
to know about. Yeah.
So you can find all my stuff at johnbergman.com, JONBERGMANN.com. Also, the website links to just reacheverystudent.com. It's the same website, so reacheverystudent.com might be easier for them to find. You can also find like my podcast, Reach Every Student podcast. I'd love you to listen to that, and of course, I'll post this on that. But if you go to my website, you can find all the links. Just so, yeah, reacheverystudent.com, and you can see the links to my 12 books and my podcast and all my writings and yeah, all that stuff.
Amazing. Yeah, that's great. Well, I want to ask one final question before we break here. So my audience it's a kind of a cool audience. It's a lot of veterans because I was in the service. So I have a lot of vets that listen, and then I also have a lot of teachers and some former students. So it's kind of this eclectic group.
Yeah.
Gets together and listen to this thing. But maybe it's one last piece of advice that you have after 40 years in the classroom on teaching and learning, something you've not written an entire book about that might be useful for a disparate crowd like that.
So this past week, I was invited. I do this about once a year. I was invited to speak at our school's chapel. We do chapel once a week, and then different teachers speak at the chapel. And I stole this from a friend of mine, but I challenged them to say, choose your hard. And so when you are in life, you are faced with choices. And so this is kind of my message to the students. You can choose to exercise, which is one level of hard, or you can choose to not exercise. But there will be consequences with both those choices. And I say, choose your hard. And in that, I showed the picture of what I'll call the John Fat picture when I was choosing the wrong things. And then I showed pictures of me doing Ironman triathlons as I made a choice, a very specific choice. You can choose to cheat using ChatGPT, or you could choose to not, and both of those are hard. And ultimately, when you need to choose the right hard. Every choice we make has consequences, and there's hard things that need to happen. And as a former vet, I mean, that's drilled into you, isn't it? That you're making good choices, and that impacts, not in your case, other people, right? If you make a bad choice, somebody's life could be at risk. Yeah. My father was an Air Force fighter pilot, so I grew up as an Air Force brat, and he flew F-4 Phantoms in Vietnam, and yeah, I mean, he was very good at what he did, and when he's actually technically he was a backseater. I don't know if you know your F4s, but he was the weapons officer in the back, and when they were choosing who was going to be their wingman or their weapons officer, the top pilot got to pick who they wanted. And my dad was number one pick because it's like, he's going to watch my tail, literally. And, he did the hard work, and that paid off, and he returned too. So choose your hard, I guess. What hard do you want to do? And it makes such a difference in your life. For your entrepreneurs, right? It's hard to start a business, and it's even harder to not start it. Choose your hard.
No, that's wonderful. That's great advice, John. We have so many different parallels. My dad was also Air Force. He was an F-16 pilot. So we're gonna have to get together and chat again.
Yeah.
Too many eerie coincidences here, but really appreciate your time. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Yep.
All right.
All right. Bye.